The auctioneer's gavel hovered above the podium like a question waiting to be answered. Evangeline Thornwood counted the seconds between his words and the heavy silence that followed. 3, 4, 5, enough time for anyone to raise their hand and save her from making the worst decision of her life. Nobody moved. 75 cents. The price mocked her from the placard propped against the podium, handwritten in black marker, because apparently nobody had bothered printing official signage for property this worthless. The Red Hollow Community Hall smelled of old coffee and fear sweat, though Evie couldn't tell if the fear belonged to her or to the 24 locals packed into folding chairs watching her with expressions that ranged from pity to something darker. Her granddaughter shifted beside her 10-year-old, fingers wrapped tight around Evie's hand. Iris had been silent since they'd entered, brown eyes taking in everything with the careful observation of a child who'd learned early that adults lied most when they smiled. The girl's other hand clutched a worn paperback, some fantasy novel about dragons and chosen ones, because Iris treated books like shields against a world that had already taken her father. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Sweat traced his temple despite October's chill bleeding through the building's cracked windows. His name tag read Martin Oaks County Assessor, but his eyes said, man doing a job he wished someone else would handle. Fair warning, folks. Property is sold as is, no inspection, no guarantees. The Ashford estate has been unoccupied since 1977. That pause carried weight. Unoccupied wasn't the same as abandoned, and everyone in this room seemed to know it except Evie. Going once for 75 cents. A woman 3 rows back whispered something to her husband. He shook his head hard enough that his John Deere cap nearly flew off. They gathered their things and left, boots echoing against warped floorboards like gunshots. Evie's throat was desert dry. This was insane. She knew that. 62 years of playing it safe, coloring inside the lines, making sensible choices. And here she stood ready to throw cents away for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. But the mortgage notice was taped to her refrigerator back in Phoenix, 60 days to vacate, stamped in red ink that might as well have been blood. And Muller's letter sat in her purse, heavy with words that had rewritten her entire history. You are the sole living heir of Silas Ashford. You have inherited the right to bid on the family estate. Not the estate itself, just the right to bid. The lawyer had been very specific about that distinction, and she still didn't understand why. Going twice. Garrett Whitmore leaned against the back wall, expensive suit making everyone else's Carhartt jackets and discount store jeans look shabby by comparison. 55 maybe, with silver threading through dark hair in a way that suggested distinction rather than age. He'd been watching her since she arrived, the kind of attention that made skin crawl. Now he smiled, small and knowing, like a man watching someone walk into a trap they'd set months ago. Evie's hand went up. The room released a collective breath that sounded like resignation. Martin's gavel fell with a crack that felt less like closure and more like a door slamming shut behind her. Sold to bidder 17. 75 cents. Iris squeezed her hand. The girl's voice was too quiet, meant only for Evie. Why is everyone looking at us like that? I don't know, baby. But she was starting to. Whitmore reached them before Evie could gather her purse. Up close, his cologne was expensive and cloying, the kind that cost more than her electric bill, and smelled like it was trying to cover something rotting underneath. His smile revealed teeth too white to be natural. Mrs. Thornwood, Garrett Whitmore and Associates. He didn't offer his hand, which somehow felt more insulting than if he had, and she'd refused. I represent several parties interested in the Ashford property. We'd like to make you an offer, $50,000 cash today. You sign the deed over, walk away, and everyone's happy. $50,000 would save the Phoenix house. Would mean Iris could keep her bedroom, her school, her friends. Would mean Evie didn't have to uproot a child who'd already lost too much. I just bought it. For 75 cents, which should tell you something. His tone made the amount sound obscene, like she'd committed a crime by accepting such obvious desperation. The property has complications. Structural issues probably. Environmental concerns. It's been vacant nearly 50 years. You have no idea what you're walking into. Then why pay $50,000 for it? Something flickered behind Whitmore's polished exterior, annoyance maybe, or calculation. Out of respect for your uncle's legacy. Silas was an important local figure. The estate deserves proper stewardship. By tearing it down. You didn't have to. Evie had taught history for 37 years. She recognized erasure when she heard it dressed up as preservation. Thank you for the offer, Mr. Whitmore. I'll need to see the property first. His jaw tightened fractionally. He extracted a business card with the precise movements of someone handling a weapon, placed it in her palm. My offer expires in 72 hours. After that, you're on your own with whatever you find there. And Mrs. Thornwood, there's a reason no one in Red Hollow wanted that house. You'll understand soon enough. He left. The few remaining locals filed out behind him, none meeting her eyes. Martin approached with paperwork and an expression caught between professional courtesy and genuine concern. Ma'am, I'm required to give you these keys and the property deed. I'm also required to inform you that all sales are final. No refunds, no recourse. He paused, weighing words. I'm not required to say this, but my mama raised me to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. Whatever you think you're going to find out there, it's probably worse. People in Red Hollow have long memories. Some things are left alone for good reason. What things? That's not my story to tell. But there's a handyman, Beaumont Fletcher, maintained the property under the estate's instructions. If anyone knows the truth, it's him. Numbers in the file. Martin handed her a manila folder thick with documents. Good luck, Mrs. Thornwood. You're going to need it. The drive to the estate took them through Red Hollow's dying downtown buildings that had given up pretending prosperity would return a gas station with pumps old enough to be vintage, a diner called Ruthie's, where the neon sign had forgotten how to spell its own name. The town looked like it was slowly dissolving, leaving only ghosts and people too stubborn to leave. Iris broke the silence as they climbed into the hills. Grandma, that lawyer man was mean. Yes, he was. And everyone acted like the house is haunted or something. Probably just superstition. But Evie's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Muller's letter had explained the basics. Silas Ashford, artist recluse, her mother's brother. The man had left her the right to bid because she was his only living blood relative, though she'd never known he existed until 6 weeks ago. The Thornwoods who'd raised her had never mentioned a Rose Ashford, never explained why a 3-year-old girl had appeared in their lives with no history beyond a forged death certificate. The GPS gave up 2 miles from the property. Evie followed handwritten directions instead, past the water tower, left at the lightning-struck cottonwood, follow the private drive to the gate. The gate rose through scrub oak like something from a fever dream, wrought iron 12 feet tall, scrollwork forming patterns that might be flowers or might be something else entirely. The chain hung severed padlock cut recently enough that rust hadn't claimed the exposed metal. Evie pushed. The gate swung open without sound. The house appeared at the end of a quarter-mile drive like a secret someone had been keeping. Massive blocks of local sandstone fitted so precisely she couldn't see mortar even up close. 2 stories, Gothic Revival architecture that had no business existing in the Arizona desert, complete with a peaked slate roof and a corner turret that served no purpose except to make the place look like it belonged in another century. But it was the condition that made her stomach drop. This wasn't abandonment. The lawn was maintained, hedges trimmed, windows clean enough to reflect October sky. Paint on the shutters looked fresh. Someone had been caring for this place, tending it like a grave they couldn't bear to leave unvisited. Iris's voice was very small. It doesn't look empty. No. It looked like someone had stepped out 5 minutes ago and might return any moment. Evie parked beside a 3-car garage doors closed and locked. The key ring from Mueller was heavy, 5 brass keys plus a small tag engraved with the number 90. She didn't know what that meant yet. The front door was scarred, oak claw marks near the bottom like something had wanted in badly enough to leave evidence. The key turned too smoothly, lock recently oiled. The door opened onto cool air that smelled wrong for abandonment. No decay, no mildew, no staleness of closed spaces. Instead, linseed oil, old paper lavender. Scents that suggested recent occupation. The foyer stretched like a gallery in a museum, hardwood in herringbone pattern barely dulled by time, a chandelier of wrought iron and amber glass, and the ceiling painted deep blue constellations picked out in gold leaf. Evie recognized them immediately. Cassiopeia, Orion, the Big Dipper, arranged exactly as they'd appear from this location on, she calculated backwards, March 15th, 1973. Someone had cared enough to mark that specific night sky permanently. Wow. Iris had released her hand, moving deeper into the house with the fearlessness of children who hadn't yet learned the world was dangerous. Grandma, look at all this stuff. Rooms branched off in careful symmetry. Dining room with a table set for 12 place settings arranged as if guests might arrive. Kitchen updated sometime recently, stainless appliances, granite counters, everything clean and waiting. Evie opened the refrigerator. Unplugged, but spotless. Not even the smell that should accumulate. The living room stopped them both. 2 walls of windows letting in slanted afternoon light. Furniture that looked expensive even to Evie's untrained eye, mid-century modern pieces that probably cost more than her car. Art on the walls mixing abstract expressionism with southwestern landscapes. And dominating the eastern wall, a stained glass window 10 feet tall. Iris moved toward it like metal to magnet. The window was geometric patterns spiraling from a central point: cobalt blue, ruby red, amber gold, emerald green. But the longer Evie stared, the more she saw intention. A compass rose, contour lines, what might be property boundaries. It is a treasure map. Iris's finger traced patterns in air not quite touching the glass. See, these lines connect and there's numbers here really small, but they're coordinates or something. It's just decorative, sweetheart. But Evie pulled out her phone and photographed it anyway because maybe Iris saw things adults had trained themselves to miss. They climbed the curved staircase to the second floor. 4 bedrooms each telling a different story. The master masculine dark wood geological specimens arranged with curator's care. Silas's room. A second decorated in soft greens vanity still holding perfume bottles and a silver hairbrush. Guest room impersonal. And then the 4th. Evie's hand froze on the doorknob. The room was small, clearly meant for a child. Handmade quilt with stars and moons. Shelves of children's books from the 60s and 70s. A rocking horse, paint faded but wood still solid. Everything preserved like a museum exhibit, like someone couldn't bear to change a single detail. On the dresser, a framed photograph. Evie picked it up with hands that had forgotten how to stay steady. A little girl, maybe 5, in a sunflower print dress. Gap-toothed smile, dark curly hair, eyes tilted slightly upward at the corners. Behind her, a man knelt, 40-something, gentle smile hand on the girl's shoulder. The little girl looked exactly like Iris at that age, exactly like Evie herself in the few childhood photos that had survived. The resemblance was impossible, undeniable, terrifying. "Grandma, who is that?" Evie's voice came from very far away. I don't know, but she was starting to suspect, and the suspicion tasted like grief she hadn't known she was carrying. Iris had already moved to the hallway, attention captured by something else. "There's another staircase. It's really narrow. I think it goes to the attic." "Not today." Evie set the photo down carefully, precisely like it might shatter, and take something irreplaceable with it. "We need to head back to Phoenix. It's getting late." They descended in silence, broken only by the house settling around them, wood and stone breathing in the October cold. Evie's mind spun with questions that had no good answers. Silas Ashford, uncle she'd never met. That little girl who looked like family. The preserved room waiting for someone who'd never come home. They were crossing the living room, heading for the front door, when sound stopped them both. A thump, low, rhythmic, coming from somewhere below their feet. Not random settling, too regular, too deliberate, like footsteps or machinery or a heartbeat trapped beneath floorboards. Iris's fingers dug into Evie's arm. "What is that?" Evie's rational mind supplied explanations. Old furnace temperature changes causing pipes to knock normal sounds amplified by empty rooms and overactive imaginations. But rationality didn't stop her pulse from hammering or her skin from going cold. The thump came again, louder, closer. "We're leaving." Evie's hand found Iris's gripped tight. "Right now." They didn't run to the car, but it was close. Evie's hand shook, jamming keys into the ignition. The Honda's engine caught on the third try, too many tries, and she reversed down the private drive faster than was safe, gravel spraying from beneath tires. Neither spoke until they were through the gate, back on the main road, Red Hollow's lights appearing in the distance like a promise that normal still existed somewhere. It was probably just pipes. Iris's voice was too steady, the false calm of a child trying to comfort a frightened adult. "Old houses make weird noises, right?" "Right. Are we going back?" Evie glanced at her granddaughter in the rearview mirror. The girl's face was pale but set with determination that looked painfully like Quinn. Her son had never backed down from challenges either, even when he should have, even when it killed him on a rainy night 3 years ago, when his car hydroplaned and the bridge railing failed and the river was waiting below. "I don't know yet, baby. I need to think." They found a motel outside Phoenix, checked into a room that smelled of industrial cleaner and strangers' lives. Iris fell asleep within minutes, exhausted by the day's strangeness. Evie lay awake, staring at ceiling water stains, mind refusing to settle. She should sell. Take Whitmore's $50,000, walk away, save the Phoenix house. It was sensible, safe, everything she'd built her life around. But 62 years of sensible had led to this widowed broke raising a granddaughter in a house they were about to lose anyway. What had playing it safe actually protected her from just the possibility of something different, something bigger than the small life she'd carved out of other people's expectations. Evie pulled out her phone, opened the photos of the stained glass window, zoomed in on different sections. The patterns did look intentional, survey markers maybe, or coordinates. She started searching. Red Hollow history, Ashford family, Silas Ashford artist. Results were sparse. A few gallery mentions from the 60s and 70s landscapes, mostly nothing controversial. Nothing explaining the preservation or the secrets or why Garrett Whitmore wanted the property badly enough to offer thousands for something worth 75 cents. She tried different terms. Ashford Estate, Red Hollow Mysteries, Missing Persons, 1977. That last one produced a hit Phoenix Gazette article from March 1977, barely 2 paragraphs. Local artist Silas Ashford reported missing from Red Hollow residence. Last seen March 14th. Investigation ongoing. No follow-up, no resolution. Silas had vanished, and apparently nobody cared enough to keep looking. Evie set the phone aside, pulled out the business card Martin Oakes had mentioned. Beaumont Fletcher handyman, a local number. Tomorrow. She'd call tomorrow after coffee and sleep and maybe some clarity about what the hell she'd gotten herself into. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling back to that photograph, the little girl in the sunflower dress who looked like Iris, like Evie herself, like family she'd never known existed. And underneath the photo's frame, barely visible, an inscription in fountain pen. Evangeline, age 5 March, 1968. Her name, her age in 1968. That little girl was her, which meant Silas had known her, had photographed her, had kept a room ready for a niece who'd never visited because she hadn't known he existed. Evie's chest tightened with something that felt like grief for a relationship she'd been robbed of before she'd known enough to miss it. Morning brought harsh light and Iris's practical voice asking about breakfast. They checked out, ate at a Denny's where coffee was bad and pancakes were worse, and Evie made her decision. "I'm calling the lawyer, Mueller. I need answers before we do anything else." Mueller and Associates occupied a modest office building wedged between a title company and a chiropractor. The receptionist was young and professionally pleasant, clearly unprepared for walk-ins demanding answers about estate law. She disappeared into the back, returned with a man in his late 60s. Gray hair, receding glasses, expression suggesting he'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. "Mrs. Thornwood, Dennis Mueller, please." His office was standard lawyer fare degrees, family photos, case files suggesting a practice built on wills and trusts and the quiet machinery of death. Mueller settled behind his desk with careful movements of someone whose back hurt more than he admitted. "I assume you have questions." "Who's been maintaining the property?" Mueller nodded as if expecting this. "Beaumont Fletcher. Local handyman, worked for Silas Ashford since 1965. The estate established a maintenance trust, small annual budget managed through our firm. Mr. Fletcher has been dedicated to his responsibilities for 50 years. 47, technically, since Silas disappeared in 1977. Evie leaned forward. "But you said Silas died 6 months ago. How can someone who disappeared in 1977 die in 2025? Mueller's expression shifted toward something like sympathy. "Arizona law permits a declaration of death after 7 years' absence under specific circumstances. Silas Ashford was declared legally dead in 1984. However, his will stipulated the estate remain sealed and maintained until certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" "The appearance of a blood heir, specifically a descendant of his sister Rose." Mueller pulled a file from his desk, slid it across. "Silas left DNA samples and detailed genealogical records. When you applied for your marriage license in 1985, the required health screening created a blood sample that eventually entered state databases. It took our investigators years to confirm the match and locate you. According to 3 independent analyses, you are Silas Ashford's great-niece, Rose's daughter." The office tilted. Evie gripped the chair's armrests, forcing air into lungs that had forgotten how to work properly. Rose. The name meant nothing, should mean nothing. Her mother was Catherine Thornwood, died of cancer in 1966 when Evie was 3. "My mother's name was Catherine Thornwood." "That's who raised you. But Catherine wasn't your biological mother." Mueller's voice was gentle now, the bedside manner of someone delivering terminal diagnoses disguised as legal facts. "According to Silas's records, you were born Evangeline Rose Ashford in August 1963. Your biological mother Rose gave birth to you at the estate, then placed you with the Thornwood family, close friends of Silas's, for your protection. Catherine and Robert legally adopted you at 6 months old." Iris made a small sound. Evie had forgotten the girl was there, sitting quietly in the corner, processing revelations that would rewrite their entire family history. "Protection from what? The will doesn't specify. Only that Rose believed you'd be safer with the Thornwoods. She died in March 1976, suicide according to the coroner. Silas became focused after that. Stopped his art career, became reclusive. 11 months later, he disappeared." Suicide. The word sat heavy as stone. Evie's voice came from somewhere distant, and nobody investigated. They tried, but Silas had no close family, no one pushing for answers. The case went cold quickly. Mueller opened the file, extracted an envelope yellowed with age. "This is for you. Silas wrote it in 1976, instructed it be given to you if you ever claimed the property." Evie's hands trembled taking it. Her name across the front in fountain pen, Evangeline, not Thornwood, her birth name, the one she'd never known was hers. She slid the letter into her purse unopened. "Not here, not with witnesses." "Is there anything else?" Mueller hesitated. "Garrett Whitmore called this morning. He's very interested in acquiring the property. Suggested I advise you to sell, said managing an estate that size would be beyond your capabilities." "I'm sure he did." "He also mentioned that certain historical matters might surface if you started investigating. Said it would be better for everyone if the past stayed buried." "What past?" He didn't elaborate, but Mrs. Thornwood, I've practiced law in Arizona for 40 years. I know when someone's worried about skeletons in closets. If you keep that property, be careful. Red Hollow has a long memory, and not all of it is kind. They left with more questions than answers. Evie drove to a park, let Iris run and climb while she sat on a bench and finally opened Silas's letter. The handwriting was precise, controlled. Evangeline. If you're reading this, you've come home. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you these truths while I lived. Some secrets protect the living, and your safety mattered more than my desire for family. Rose was my sister, my closest friend, the brightest soul I ever knew. What was done to her was unforgivable. What she did to protect you broke her. She wanted you to have a normal life away from the shadows that touched our family. The house holds answers, not all of them, but enough. The truth is in places light doesn't reach. She wrote that in her journal, and I've honored her instruction. When you're ready, you'll understand. Be careful. The people who hurt Rose are still powerful, still protected. They believe time has erased their crimes. Prove them wrong. Your Uncle Silas. Evie read it 3 times, hands shaking. Rose, her mother. Not Catherine, who'd been kind and distant and dead before Evie could form real memories. Rose, who'd given her up to protect her, who'd died by her own hand carrying grief Evie couldn't begin to imagine. And Silas, who'd spent decades keeping the estate ready, waiting for the niece he'd given away to someday come home. She watched Iris swing higher, the girl's laughter carrying across the playground like proof that joy could exist, even when everything else was broken. Evie pulled out her phone, dialed the number Muller had given her. An elderly voice answered, rough with age and cigarettes. Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher, my name is Evangeline Thornwood. I believe you knew my Uncle Silas Ashford. A long silence. Then, I've been waiting for this call for 47 years. When can you come to Red Hollow? Tomorrow. Good. There's much to discuss. And Mrs. Thornwood, his voice dropped. Don't trust anyone connected to the Whitmore family. Whatever they've told you is either a lie or half a truth designed to protect themselves. Neither is safe. The line went dead. Evie sat on that bench as October's sun climbed higher, watching her granddaughter play, feeling the weight of inheritance settling onto shoulders that had carried widowhood and loss and quiet desperation. But never this, never the responsibility of learning who she actually was, where she actually came from, what crimes had been committed to make her existence necessary. Rose had been her mother, had loved her enough to give her away, had died carrying secrets Evie was only beginning to glimpse. Someone had to remember her. Someone had to care that she'd suffered. Someone had to make it matter. Evie stood, called to Iris. Pack your things when we get home, baby. We're moving to Red Hollow. The girl's face lit with uncomplicated joy, the kind only children manage when adults' decisions feel like adventure rather than necessity. For how long? As long as it takes. They drove back to Phoenix, started packing a life into boxes small enough to fit in a Honda Civic. Evie terminated the lease, sold furniture for whatever she could get, pulled Iris from school with promises to enroll her somewhere new. The girl helped without complaint, as if uprooting everything familiar was just another thing that happened when you were 10 and your grandmother was all you had left. That night, Evie lay in bed staring at water-stained ceiling for the last time, mind spinning through everything she knew and everything she didn't. Rose had been hurt badly enough to kill herself. Silas had disappeared rather than let her evidence be buried. Garrett Whitmore wanted the property desperately enough to offer $50,000 for something worth 75 cents. And somewhere in that house, in places light didn't reach, the truth was waiting. Evie pulled out her phone, looked at the photo of the stained glass window one more time. Iris had called it a treasure map. Maybe the girl was right. Maybe everything she needed was already there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to finally look. She fell asleep, still holding the phone, dreaming of constellations that marked specific dates, of little girls in sunflower dresses, of mothers she'd never known who'd loved her enough to disappear. Morning came with the finality of decisions that couldn't be undone. They loaded the Honda, locked the Phoenix house for the last time, and drove toward Red Hollow with everything they owned and nothing left to lose. Evie's hands were steady on the wheel. Her voice was steady too when Iris asked if she was scared. "Terrified. But I'm doing it anyway. Daddy used to say that's what brave means. Being scared but doing it anyway." Quinn's wisdom delivered through his daughter's voice. Evie's chest tightened, but this time it felt less like grief and more like purpose. "Your father was right about a lot of things." They drove in silence as Phoenix disappeared behind them, and the desert opened up ahead, vast and patient and holding secrets, the way earth holds bones carefully, indefinitely, until someone comes digging. They returned to Red Hollow 3 days later, Honda Civic packed with suitcases and boxes containing what remained of their Phoenix life. Evie had sold most of the furniture, terminated the lease a month early, pulled Iris from school with promises to enroll her in Red Hollow Elementary. The girl had taken it all with remarkable composure, as if uprooting her entire existence was just another adventure in a childhood already marked by loss. The gate stood open when they arrived. Evie's pulse quickened. She'd locked it carefully before leaving, double-checked the chain. But there, leaning against a battered Ford pickup truck, circa 1985, stood a man who could only be Beaumont Fletcher. 76 years had carved deep lines into his face, weathered skin dark from decades under Arizona sun. He wore jeans held up by suspenders, flannel shirt rolled to his elbows, work boots that had seen better decades. But his eyes were sharp, assessing, taking in Evie and Iris with the careful attention of someone who'd learned to read people the way others read books. "Mrs. Thornwood." He straightened, moved forward with a slight limp favoring his left leg. "You look like Rose. Same eyes, same way of holding your chin when you're nervous." Evie's hand went unconsciously to her throat. "You knew her?" "Knew them both. Silas hired me in 1965, fresh out of the Army, needed work that didn't involve killing. I built half the custom furniture in that house, maintained the grounds, kept my mouth shut when it mattered." He glanced at Iris. "This must be the great-granddaughter. You've got the Ashford nose, girl. Won't ever lose a profile contest." Iris giggled despite herself. Beau's face softened into something approaching a smile, then settled back into the careful neutrality of someone who'd spent a lifetime keeping secrets. "Come inside. We need to talk before the vultures start circling." The house felt different in daylight, less oppressive. Beau moved through it with the familiarity of someone who'd walked these halls thousands of times, leading them to the kitchen where he'd already started coffee. The domesticity of it, mugs, set out sugar bowl placed just so, made Evie's chest tighten. This man had been alone with ghosts for 47 years, tending a house for people who'd never come home. Until now. He poured coffee with steady hands. "Silas made me promise. Said someday Rose's daughter would appear, and when she did, I was to help however I could. Didn't know if I'd live long enough to see it, but here we are. Muller said you've been maintaining the estate all this time. Every week since Silas disappeared. Mow the lawn, check for leaks, make sure the roof stays sound. Paid from the trust, not much, but enough. People in town thought I was crazy talking to myself in an empty house. Let them think it." Beau sipped his coffee, eyes distant. Place needed someone who remembered. Iris had wandered to the window, looking out at the grounds. Evie leaned forward, voice low. "What happened to Rose, really?" Beau's jaw worked. "Nothing I can prove. But I was here the night she died, March 1976. Silas called me frantic, said Rose had locked herself in the master bedroom. By the time we broke the door down, she'd taken pills. Whole bottle of barbiturates washed down with bourbon. Left a note that Silas burned before I could read it, but I saw his face after. Whatever she wrote, it destroyed something in him." Suicide. That's what the coroner ruled. But Rose wasn't depressed that week. She'd been different, angry, determined. Silas said she'd been talking about going to the authorities, about exposing something. Then suddenly she's dead, and Silas is different too. Scared. Started collecting documents, painting like a man possessed. 9 months later, he vanishes. Evie wrapped both hands around her mug, needing the warmth. "Muller mentioned the Whitmore family. You said not to trust them." Beau's expression hardened. Randolph Whitmore was the devil in a three-piece suit. Town lawyer, pillar of the community, deacon at First Methodist. Also a predator who used his position to destroy anyone who got in his way. Rose worked as his secretary in 1962, fresh out of business school. By spring of '63, she was pregnant and unemployed. Silas brought her here, said she'd been hurt but wouldn't give details. Randolph assaulted her. Raped her, let's use the word. Rose tried reporting it, but Randolph had the sheriff in his pocket, the mayor half the county. They convinced her she'd be destroyed if she pressed charges. Reputation ruined, unemployable, probably institutionalized for making false accusations against a respected attorney. So she disappeared here. Silas registered her death in another county, forged papers. Far as Red Hollow knew, Rose Ashford died in a car accident in Flagstaff. Iris had gone very still at the window. Evie wanted to shield her from this, but the girl had already lived through her father's death, already understood that the world wasn't safe or fair. Better she learned now that some monsters wore suits. And Silas gave me to the Thornwoods. Placed you with people who'd love you, protect you. The Thornwoods were good folk. Robert taught art at Northern Arizona University. Catherine volunteered at the library. They'd been trying for children, couldn't have their own. Silas trusted them completely. Beau's voice roughened. Rose got to hold you exactly once before you left. I was there. Watched her memorize your face like she was trying to carry it into the next life. The coffee had gone cold. Evie set it aside, throat too tight for swallowing. Why didn't she fight? Why give up? Because Randolph threatened to take you, raise you himself as proof of Rose's instability. Said he'd make sure she never saw you again, would tell you your mother was a disturbed woman who'd made false accusations. Rose believed him. Man had destroyed people for less. Where is he now, Randolph? Dead. Heart attack in 1989, right in the middle of a trial. His son Garrett took over the practice. Apple didn't fall far from that particular tree. The pieces were assembling into a picture Evie didn't want to see. Her mother, young and terrified, raped by a man powerful enough to erase consequences. Her birth, the result of violence. Her entire existence a secret kept to protect her from a monster who'd wanted to own even his crimes. Iris turned from the window. Can we explore the house now? I want to see everything in the daytime. Beau glanced at Evie, who nodded. Sometimes children process trauma through action, through touching and seeing and making the incomprehensible real. Iris needed to move to claim this space as hers before the weight of its history crushed her. Stay on this floor for now, Evie managed. We'll look at the upstairs together later. The girl disappeared toward the living room. Evie heard her footsteps crossing hardwood, then silence as she presumably stopped at the stained glass window. Beau pulled a small notebook from his shirt pocket, slid it across the table. Rose's handwriting. I found this in the workshop 6 months after Silas disappeared. He'd hidden it behind a loose board, probably meant to give it to you someday. Didn't seem right to hand it over to Mueller. Lawyers have rules about evidence, but family can do what they want with their own history. The journal was small bound in cracked leather pages, yellowed but intact. Evie opened it with trembling fingers. Rose's handwriting was elegant. Each letter carefully formed the script of someone who'd been taught penmanship mattered. January 15th, 1963. Silas says I should write it down. Says truth has power even when no one hears it. So here it is. Randolph Whitmore raped me in his office on December 3rd, 1962. I went to report inventory discrepancies, stayed late because he said it was urgent. He locked the door. I said no 17 times. I counted. Evie's vision blurred. She flipped forward, skimming entries that detailed pregnancy, fear, Silas's fierce protection. Rose's voice came through the pages, intelligent, wounded, fighting to maintain dignity while her world collapsed. March 8th, 1963. The baby moved today. Silas says it's like butterflies, but it feels heavier than that. Like a promise I'm not sure I can keep. What kind of mother brings a child into a world this broken? August 12, 1963. Silas found a family. The Thornwoods. They're good people. Robert paints watercolors. Catherine reads to children at the hospital. They want a daughter. They'll give her everything I can't: safety, normalcy, a father who won't be a ghost story. I'm being selfish even considering keeping her, but God, I want to be selfish just this once. The entries grew sparser after Evie's birth. Rose's handwriting deteriorated, letters slanting, words crossed out. Depression settling in like fog. November 1965. Saw Evangeline today. Silas took me to the park where the Thornwoods go on Sundays. She's too learning to run, laughing at pigeons. Catherine caught her when she fell, kissed her scraped knee. I had to leave. Couldn't breathe watching someone else mother my daughter. Evie couldn't read more, not yet. Not with Beau watching and Iris in the next room, and the weight of Rose's loneliness pressing down like physical force. She closed the journal carefully, slid it into her purse next to Silas's letter. Thank you for keeping this safe. Beau nodded. There's more. Documents Silas collected, evidence he was building against Randolph and the whole corrupt network. He hid it somewhere in this house, said it was too dangerous to keep in one place, too important to destroy. Rose's last journal entry mentioned, "The place light doesn't reach." Silas repeated that phrase to me the week before he vanished, said if anything happened to him I should tell whoever came looking. The basement. Seems likely. But I've been down there dozens of times over the years, never found anything except old furniture and Christmas decorations. If Silas hid something, he hid it well. A crash from the living room sent them both lurching to their feet. Evie's heart seized Iris, but the girl's voice called out immediately, embarrassed rather than hurt. I'm okay. Just knocked over a lamp. They found her sprawled on the oriental rug, brass floor lamp toppled beside her, shade dented. But Iris wasn't looking at the damage. Her attention was fixed on the hardwood beneath where the lamp had stood. Grandma, the floor sounds different here. Evie knelt beside her. The boards looked identical to the rest, same wood, same finish, same age. But when she rapped her knuckles against them, the sound was hollow. Not quite empty, but different from the solid thunk of floor with nothing beneath. Beau grabbed a butter knife from his pocket. Apparently the man carried tools everywhere and worked it along the seam between boards. The third plank lifted with surprising ease, revealing a space maybe 8 inches deep carved into the subfloor. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Evie's hands shook as she unwrapped it. More journals, 3 of them, all in Rose's handwriting. And beneath those a stack of photographs bound with twine. The top photo made her breath stop. Rose, maybe 22, standing in front of the Ashford estate with her arms around a little girl. 5 years old, gap-toothed smile, the same child from the bedroom photograph. Except the little girl wasn't a stranger. It was Evie. She flipped through the stack. More photos spanning years. Evie at 2 feeding ducks at a park. Evie at 3 on a swing. Evie at 4 building a sandcastle. Always candid, always from a distance. Rose never in frame, except that first one. She followed me. Beau's voice was rough. Every Sunday. Never approached, never interfered. Just watched you grow up from whatever distance she could manage. Silas thought it was torture, but Rose said it was the only thing keeping her alive. Iris leaned against Evie's shoulder, studying the photographs with the intensity of someone trying to memorize faces before they faded. She looked sad, even when she's smiling. Children saw things adults trained themselves to miss. Rose's smile in that one photograph was brittle, held together by will rather than joy. The smile of someone who'd learned happiness was something you performed, not something you felt. Evie gathered the journals and photos started to stand, then froze. At the bottom of the hiding space, almost invisible against the dark wood, lay a folded piece of paper. Modern paper, not aged like the journals. She pulled it out, unfolded it. The handwriting wasn't Rose's. Masculine, precise, written in fountain pen. Evangeline, if you've found this, you're already asking questions. The answers are below, where I kept everything Rose couldn't bear to look at. The key is in the constellation. Cassiopeia points the way. Trust Beaumont. Trust no one else. Some crimes are too profitable to forgive. Silas Cassiopeia. The constellation painted on the foyer ceiling. Evie's mind raced. She'd noticed the stars that first day, recognized the patterns, but hadn't considered they might mean something beyond decoration. Beau. The ceiling in the foyer. Painted exactly as the stars appeared on March 15, 1973. Silas spent weeks getting the positions right, used astronomical charts, made it precise to the degree. I asked why once. He said Rose wanted to mark the moment she decided to live. March 15th. Evie pulled out Rose's first journal, flipped to that date. March 15th, 1973. Saw Evangeline today. She's 10, reading on a park bench while Robert sketches nearby. She was reading A Wrinkle in Time, same book I loved at her age. I almost approached, almost broke every rule Silas and I made. But then she looked up and smiled at nothing, just the sky and the day, and being alive, and I realized she's happy. She doesn't need me haunting her childhood. Maybe that's enough. Maybe knowing she's happy is how I survive this. Evie's vision swam. She pressed her palms against her eyes, forcing back tears that threatened to overwhelm. Rose had watched her read, had taken comfort in seeing her daughter smile at a blue sky, had decided that small moment was worth surviving for. The constellation. She stood, voice steadier than she felt. We need to look at it. The foyer's afternoon light painted the ceiling in shades of gold and shadow. Cassiopeia appeared as 5 bright stars in a distinctive W shape, positioned in the northeastern portion of the painted sky. Evie studied it from different angles, trying to see what Silas had meant. Iris walked directly beneath the constellation, tilted her head back. It looks like it's pointing. See, if you draw a line from the middle star down. She traced an invisible line with her finger. The trajectory led toward the far wall where a grandfather clock stood silent, hands frozen at 3:47. Evie hadn't noticed it before. The foyer contained so much visual information that individual pieces had blurred together. Beau was already moving toward it. This clock came from Silas's mother, belonged to the family for generations, supposedly brought over from Germany in the 1880s. Never worked right, always stopped at odd times. The clock was impressive, 8 feet tall, walnut case, ornately carved brass pendulum visible through a glass panel. The clock face showed moon phases, days of the week, a second hand that should have swept smoothly but instead sat motionless. Evie opened the front panel, expecting to find mechanical guts rusted into stillness. Instead, she found a keyhole where the pendulum should attach. The brass tag on her keyring. Number 90. She pulled out the keys Muller had given her, hands trembling so badly it took 3 tries to fit the smallest brass key into the lock. It turned with a click that sounded like a door opening onto the past. The clock's back panel swung outward. Behind it, stairs descended into darkness. For a long moment, none of them moved. The basement entrance Beau had known about for decades was in the kitchen, accessed through a conventional door that led to a conventional cellar full of conventional storage. This was something else. This was the place light didn't reach. Beau pulled a flashlight from his belt. I'll go first. If there's structural damage, we go together. Evie's voice left no room for argument. All 3 of us. This is my history, our history. The stairs were steep wooden planks that creaked under their weight. Beau's flashlight beam cut through darkness thick as water, revealing stone walls built from the same sandstone as the house's exterior. The air changed as they descended, cooler, drier, carrying scents of old paper and something else. Linseed oil, the smell of the house that first day. The stairs ended in a room maybe 20 feet square, ceiling low enough that Beau had to duck slightly. But it wasn't empty. Filing cabinets lined 3 walls, metal cases that gleamed dully in the flashlight beam. A desk sat in the center, its surface covered with papers weighted down by stones. And on the 4th wall, illuminated by Beau's light, hung paintings. Dozens of them. Small canvases, maybe 8 by 10 inches each, arranged in precise rows. Evie moved closer, studying the nearest ones. Landscapes, all of them desert vistas, mountain ranges, specific locations rendered in Silas's distinctive style. But in the corner of each painting, small numbers were inscribed. Property coordinates. Sweet Jesus, Beau's whisper echoed off stone. He documented everything. Evie opened the nearest filing cabinet. Manila folders, each labeled with a name, a date, a property description. She pulled one at random. Inside, contracts, deeds, photographs of land, notarized documents with official seals. And then underneath the legitimate-looking paperwork, copies of the same documents with different signatures, different dates, different buyers. The same land sold multiple times. She pulled another folder. Same pattern. Another. Cabinet after cabinet of evidence fraud on a scale that made her dizzy trying to comprehend. Iris had gravitated to the desk, small hands picking up papers with the careful reverence of someone who understood they were touching something important. "Grandma, these are letters. Someone was threatening people." Evie joined her, skimming typewritten pages on Whitmore and Associates letterhead. The language was formal, legal, carefully constructed to sound legitimate while delivering unmistakable menace. Threats of lawsuits for questioning property rights, reminders of criminal penalties for slander, suggestions that families might find life easier in other towns, other states, other places where they didn't ask inconvenient questions. All signed by Randolph Whitmore. "How many—" Evie's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "How many families did they target?" Beau was opening cabinets, systematically counting folders. 89. Jesus Christ. 89 families defrauded between 1955 and 1975. Sold the same parcels 3, 4, sometimes 5 times. Collected payment from everyone, forged documents to make each sale look legitimate, then used the legal system to crush anyone who complained. The scope of it was staggering. 2 decades of systematic theft protected by lawyers and judges and whoever else Randolph had bought or blackmailed into silence. Millions of dollars in modern value. Entire families destroyed, driven out, erased from Red Hollow's history. And Rose had known. Somehow she'd learned what Randolph was doing and started collecting evidence. That's why she'd died. Not depression. Not guilt over giving up her daughter. Murder disguised as suicide. Evie's hands clenched. Rose was going to expose him. Beau nodded slowly. "That's what I think. She'd been cataloging this for years, building an airtight case. Then suddenly she's dead, and Silas inherits her obsession. Finishes what she started, paints those landscapes as his own documentation, each one a property that was stolen, each one a testimony. Then he disappears before he can use it." "Garrett knows about this." Evie's voice was flat. "He has to. That's why he wants the house. Not the property itself, the evidence. He's terrified it will surface. 50 years later, most of the victims are dead. Statute of limitations probably applies to the original crimes. But the reputational damage—" Beau gestured at the cabinets. "Whitmore and Associates is still the most prestigious law firm in the county. Garrett's on the State Bar Association, runs charitable foundations, has a daughter in the legislature. This gets out, the family name is destroyed." Iris had gone very quiet, shoulders hunched. Evie pulled her close, felt the girl trembling against her side. Too much. This was all too much for a 10-year-old who should be worrying about multiplication tables and making friends, not learning that her family's history was built on violence and systematic evil. But Iris's voice, when it came, was steady. "We have to tell people, right? That's what Silas wanted." Evie looked at her granddaughter, this fierce, small person who'd lost her father and kept living, who'd been uprooted from everything familiar and adapted without complaint, who understood instinctively that some truths mattered more than safety. "Yes, that's what we have to do." They spent the rest of the afternoon cataloging. Beau had brought his camera, photographed every document, every painting, every piece of evidence Silas and Rose had assembled. Evie created an inventory, organized folders, chronologically started building a timeline of the fraud. The scale of it became clearer with each folder. Randolph hadn't worked alone, couldn't have. The scheme required cooperation from county clerks, surveyors, tax assessors, judges who'd ruled in his favor when disputed titles went to court. An entire network of corruption, each person taking their cut, each one complicit in destroying families who'd trusted the law to protect them. By the time they climbed back up through the grandfather clock, evening had settled over Red Hollow like a held breath. Evie's back ached from hunching over files, eyes burned from reading decades-old typeface. Iris looked exhausted, face pale but determined. Beau paused at the kitchen table. "You understand what you're taking on. Garrett won't let this go quietly. Neither will anyone else whose reputation depends on the Whitmore name staying clean. I know. You'll need lawyers of your own. Investigators. Probably protection. I know. And you're going to do it anyway." Evie met his eyes. Rose was 22 years old when Randolph raped her. He destroyed her life, took her daughter, drove her to suicide, and never faced consequences. Then he died peacefully at 63, probably thinking he'd gotten away with it. Garrett's built his entire career on his father's reputation, used the family name to make himself untouchable. Someone has to care. Someone has to say this mattered. Beau's expression shifted, not quite approval, but respect. Silas would be proud. Rose, too. He pulled a business card from his wallet, scribbled a number on the back. "My nephew's a civil rights attorney in Tucson. He's handled whistleblower cases taken on institutional corruption. Not cheap, but he's honest. Tell him I sent you." After Beau left, Evie and Iris ate dinner in silence, sandwiches assembled from supplies they'd brought from Phoenix. The house felt different now, knowing what lay beneath its floors. Not haunted exactly. Purposeful. Built to contain secrets until someone brave or stupid enough came along to set them free. Iris picked at her sandwich. "Do you think Rose would want us here? Living in her house, going through her things?" Evie considered the question seriously. "I think she spent 13 years watching me from a distance, loving me the only way she could. I think she wanted me to know the truth, even if it hurt, even if it destroyed the safe story I'd been told. The Thornwoods were nice to you, though, right? They were wonderful, gave me everything they had, but they weren't my mother, and Rose was. Both things can be true." Iris nodded, slowly processing. "Then, are we going to be okay? Like safe? Okay?" Honesty mattered more than comfort. "I don't know, sweetheart. But we're together and we're doing the right thing. Sometimes that has to be enough." They washed dishes, started unpacking suitcases into the guest bedrooms upstairs. Evie gave Iris the room decorated in soft greens, figured the girl would feel safer in a space that didn't carry obvious ghosts. She took Silas's room for herself, surrounded by his books and specimens, and the weight of a man who'd tried to balance art and justice and lost everything in the attempt. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion dragged her under within minutes. She woke to Iris shaking her shoulder, the girl's whisper urgent in darkness. "Grandma, someone's outside." Evie's heart lurched. She followed Iris to the window, peered through curtains into moonlit grounds. A black sedan sat idling beyond the gate, headlights off, barely visible except for the faint glow of a cigarette inside. Watching. Evie pulled out her phone, considered calling the sheriff, then remembered Beau's warning about local law enforcement being compromised. Instead, she took photos, zoomed in as far as her camera would allow, captured the license plate. The car remained for exactly 15 minutes, then pulled away slowly, deliberately, making sure they knew it had been there. Evie sat on the edge of her bed, pulse hammering. Iris curled against her side, small and warm and trusting in a way that made Evie's chest physically ache. This was the warning shot. The message that Garrett Whitmore knew what they'd found and wanted them afraid. She thought of Rose, 22 and pregnant and terrified, silenced by a system designed to protect men like Randolph. Thought of Silas vanishing into the Arizona desert rather than watch his evidence be buried again. Thought of 89 families destroyed, erased, forgotten because no one had cared enough to remember. Fear was reasonable. Fear was probably the smart response. But Evie had been reasonable for 62 years, and it had gotten her exactly nowhere except alone and broke and mourning people she'd loved who'd died anyway despite her best efforts to protect them. Maybe it was time to be unreasonable. She pulled Rose's journal from her purse, open to a random page. Rose's handwriting steadied her words written decades ago, speaking directly to this moment. June 3rd, 1975. Silas says I should let it go, that fighting men like Randolph only gets you buried beside the truth. But I can't. Evangeline exists because he took what he wanted and the law let him. If I don't fight, what does that teach her about justice? That powerful men always win. That women's pain doesn't matter. I'd rather die trying than live knowing I taught my daughter to accept the unacceptable. Evie closed the journal carefully. Rose had died trying. Died because she'd believed some battles mattered more than survival. Well, she'd given Evie life twice, once through birth, once through example. Time to finish what her mother started. Morning came with the grinding sound of Beau's truck pulling up the drive at 7 sharp. Evie met him at the door, Iris still asleep upstairs, exhaustion having finally claimed the girl around 4 a.m. The older man carried a toolbox in one hand and a paper bag that smelled of coffee and pastries in the other. Figured you'd be awake. Nobody sleeps well the first night after finding their family's been destroyed by monsters. He set the bag on the kitchen counter, poured coffee from a thermos into 2 mugs. Saw the sedan last night. They're not subtle when they want you scared. Evie wrapped her hands around the mug's warmth. I took photos. License plate, everything. Won't matter. Car's probably registered to some shell company or borrowed from a friend of a friend. Whitmores are careful that way, always have been. But the message is clear. They know you found the evidence and they want you gone. I'm not leaving. Beau's weathered face creased into something that might have been approval. Didn't figure you would. Rose's daughter through and through, stubborn as bedrock. He sipped his coffee, studying her with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. So, you want to live in this house or just use it as a storage facility for evidence? The question caught her off guard. What? Place needs work. Roof's got maybe 5 years left. Some of the window seals are failing. Kitchen plumbing makes noises that worry me. I've been doing maintenance, but that's different from restoration. You and the girl planning to actually make this home, or you just camping out while you fight your war? Evie looked around the kitchen. Beautiful bones beneath decades of deferred care, appliances that worked but barely cabinets that could shine with proper attention. She thought of the Phoenix house she'd lost, the bedroom Iris would never sleep in again, the life they'd left behind that was already fading like a photograph in sunlight. Home. We're making it home. Good. Beau finished his coffee in one long swallow. Then let's get started. Work's the best cure for fear, keeps your hands busy while your mind processes all the reasons you should run. They spent the morning on practical matters. Beau showed Evie which breakers controlled which rooms, where the main water shutoff was located, how to reset the ancient furnace when it inevitably threw a tantrum. He pointed out structural issues that needed addressing: a crack in the foundation's southeast corner loose, flashing around the chimney, sections of dry rot in the second-floor bathroom that required immediate attention. Iris emerged around 9, drawn by voices and the smell of pastries. Beau handed her a chocolate croissant and a toolbox without preamble. You want to live here, you learn how to maintain here. Can't rely on old men forever, we die inconveniently. Come on, I'll teach you how to fix a window seal. The girl's face lit up with the particular joy of being treated like someone capable rather than someone fragile. Evie watched them head upstairs together, Beau's patient explanation of expansion and contraction mixing with Iris's rapid-fire questions. Alone in the kitchen, Evie pulled out her phone and dialed the number Beau had given her. 3 rings, then a woman's voice, sharp and immediate. Monroe Investigations. Ms. Monroe, my name is Evangeline Thornwood. Beaumont Fletcher suggested I call you. A pause, background noise suggesting a busy office. Beau doesn't give out my number unless something's seriously wrong. What's the situation? Evie had practiced this pitch in her head, tried to find words that would convey urgency without sounding unhinged. But standing in Rose's kitchen surrounded by evidence of her mother's destroyed life, the rehearsed speech evaporated. I inherited a house in Red Hollow from an uncle I never knew. Turns out my mother was raped by a prominent attorney in 1962, gave birth to me in secret, then killed herself in 1976 after discovering he'd been running a massive land fraud operation. My uncle spent years documenting the crime, then disappeared. I found evidence of 89 families being systematically defrauded over 2 decades, and the lawyer's son is currently trying to buy the property to bury everything again. Silence stretched so long Evie thought the call had dropped. Then Cassandra Monroe's voice came back different now, focused, hungry, in the way journalists got when they scented a real story. 89 families. You have documentation. Files, photographs, paintings, journals. My uncle was an artist. He painted each stolen property and scribed the coordinates. My mother kept records of everything. It's airtight. And you're calling me instead of the FBI because the fraud happened 50 years ago and most of the victims are dead. Statute of limitations probably applies. But the Whitmore family is still powerful law firm, political connections, charitable foundations. They've built their reputation on their father's name. I want that name destroyed. Another pause. Where are you right now? The estate, Red Hollow. Don't talk to anyone else. Don't show anyone else the evidence. I'm 3 hours away. Can you meet me halfway? There's a diner off the 60 Pete's place just past the Florence Junction. 2 o'clock. Evie checked the time. Doable if they left by 1. I'll be there. Mrs. Thornwood, if what you're telling me is real, this is the kind of story that ends careers. Mine if I get it wrong, theirs if I get it right. You better be certain. I'm certain. The call ended. Evie stood in the kitchen's October light, feeling the weight of what she'd just set in motion. Investigative journalism meant publicity, scrutiny, exposure. It meant dragging Rose's rape into public record, making Evie's own conception a matter of news coverage and comment sections. It meant Iris learning details no child should have to carry about how she came to exist. But silence was violence too. Silence was choosing the comfort of the living over justice for the dead. She climbed upstairs, found Beau showing Iris how to apply caulk to a window frame, the girl's tongue poking out in concentration as she worked the caulking gun. They'd opened the studio. Evie had avoided the 4th bedroom with the child-sized furniture and the photo of 5-year-old Evie in a sunflower dress. Beau caught her expression. Figured we might as well face it. Room's not doing anyone good sitting empty. Iris had already claimed it with the ruthless efficiency of children who understood possession. Her backpack sat on the small desk, stuffed animals arranged on the handmade quilt, drawing supplies spread across the floor. The photograph of young Evie now shared shelf space with a framed picture of Quinn that Iris had brought from Phoenix, father and daughter side by side across decades and death. I like it here. Iris's voice was matter-of-fact, accepting. It feels like someone was waiting for me. Rose had been waiting for the daughter she'd given away to come home, bring a granddaughter who'd never been born when Rose died. The house had been holding space for family that took 60 years to arrive. Evie's throat tightened. We're meeting someone this afternoon, a journalist who might be able to help us tell Rose's story. You want to come or stay here with Beau? Stay. Iris returned to caulking, didn't look up. I want to finish the windows. Beau says once we seal them all, the house will be warmer in winter. Planning for winter, planning to stay. The girl had made her choice. This house, this history, this impossible inheritance were theirs now. Evie drove to Florence Junction alone, grateful for the silence and the empty highway. Her mind spun through scenarios, rehearsing what to say, how to present the evidence without sounding like a conspiracy theorist, or worse, someone seeking revenge for personal trauma disguised as justice. Pete's place turned out to be a truck stop diner, all chrome and vinyl and fluorescent lights that bleached color from everything. Evie arrived 15 minutes early, ordered coffee she didn't drink, watched 18-wheelers lumber in and out of the parking lot. Cassandra Monroe walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. Mid-40s, Evie guessed, with the kind of presence that made people notice, not beautiful in a conventional sense, but striking. Dark hair pulled back severely, no makeup, dressed in jeans and a leather jacket that had seen weather. She scanned the room with a cop's efficiency, spotted Evie, and crossed directly without hesitation. "Mrs. Thornwood." They shook hands. Cassie's grip was firm, calloused, the hands of someone who did physical work alongside the intellectual kind. She slid into the booth, waved off the waitress, pulled a digital recorder from her jacket. "I'm going to record this if that's okay. Not for broadcast, for my notes. I don't publish anything without consent." Evie nodded. The recorder clicked on. "Tell me everything." So she did. Started with Muller's letter, and the 75-cent auction moved through finding Rose's journals, and Silas's evidence described the basement full of documentation and the systematic destruction of 89 families. Cassie listened without interrupting, face neutral, except for occasional tightening around her eyes when details cut particularly deep. When Evie finished, the journalist sat back, fingers drumming against the table's laminate surface. "You brought proof." Evie pulled out her phone, scrolled through the photos Beau had taken. Contracts, letters. Rose's journal entries, images of Silas's paintings with property coordinates visible. Cassie studied each one, occasionally zooming in, her expression shifting from skeptical to convinced to something harder, the look of someone who'd found a target worth pursuing. "This is substantial. More than substantial, this is career-defining if it holds up." She glanced up, eyes sharp. "But you need to understand what publishing this means. Your mother's rape becomes public record, your conception. Every detail of her trauma gets examined, questioned, probably doubted by people who'll defend Randolph Whitmore, because admitting he was a monster means admitting they enabled him." "I know. You'll get death threats. So will I. Your granddaughter will be targeted. Kids are cruel, and someone will make sure she knows her grandmother was born from violence." "I know. And the legal system probably can't touch anyone. Randolph's dead. Most of his accomplices are dead. The people still alive will claim ignorance or say they were following orders or hide behind statutes of limitation. You won't get criminal justice." "But I'll get truth." Evie's voice was steady, certain. "Rose died thinking nobody would ever know what Randolph did to her, what he did to dozens of other families. Silas disappeared believing his evidence would never matter. I can't give them justice, but I can give them memory. I can make sure the Whitmore name means rapist and fraud instead of respected attorney. That's not nothing." Cassie's expression shifted, respect maybe, or recognition. "No, that's not nothing." She pocketed the recorder. "I need 48 hours. I'm going to verify everything I can: property records, court documents, death certificates. I'll reach out to descendants of the families Silas documented, see if anyone's willing to go on record. If this checks out, and I think it will, I can place the story with the Arizona Republic. Front page, full investigative series. How long before it publishes? Week, maybe 2. Depends on legal review and editor approval. But once it runs, there's no putting it back. The Whitmores will lawyer up, come after both of us with everything they have. Let them." Evie stood, leaving cash on the table for coffee she hadn't touched. "I've been powerless my entire life. Took orders, followed rules, made myself small so I wouldn't cause trouble. 62 years of choosing safety over truth. I'm done." Cassie stood too, held out her hand again. This time the handshake felt like a pact, two women committing to a fight they both knew would cost more than they could probably afford. "I'll call you when I have something. And Mrs. Thornwood, thank you. People like the Whitmores only win when nobody's willing to fight. You're fighting. That matters." The drive back to Red Hollow felt longer, tension building in Evie's shoulders as the sun dropped toward the horizon. She'd committed now. Set forces in motion that couldn't be stopped or recalled. Within weeks, maybe days, Rose's story would be public. Randolph's crimes would be exposed. And Garrett Whitmore would do whatever powerful men did when their carefully constructed reputations started crumbling. The house appeared through the evening light exactly as she'd left it, solid, waiting, full of secrets that were no longer secret. Beau's truck was gone, but lights glowed in the windows Iris had sealed that afternoon. Home in the way places become home when you've bled into them. Evie found Iris in the library, curled in an oversized armchair with a book, one of Silas's volumes on Southwestern art history. The girl looked up, marked her place. "How'd it go?" "Good. The journalist is going to investigate, verify everything. If it checks out, she'll publish." Iris nodded slowly. "And then people will know about Rose. About what happened." "Yes." "Will they say mean things about us?" Honesty mattered more than comfort. "Probably. Some people protect powerful men by attacking the women they hurt. It's easier than admitting they looked the other way." "That's not fair." "No, but fairness isn't the same as truth, and truth is what we're fighting for." Iris set the book aside, small face serious beyond her years. "Daddy used to say doing the right thing usually costs something. That's how you know it's right. If it was easy, everyone would do it." Quinn's wisdom delivered through his daughter's voice. Evie's chest tightened with the particular grief of missing someone who'd taught you how to be brave without realizing they were preparing you for battles they'd never see. "Your father was a smart man. He'd be proud of you, Grandma." "I know that." They ate dinner together, spaghetti from a jar, garlic bread from the freezer section, sitting at the massive dining room table that could seat 12 but currently held just 2. Iris chattered about window seals and caulking and how Beau had promised to teach her basic carpentry tomorrow. Normal conversation, ordinary life, resuming despite everything. After Iris went to bed, Evie returned to the library. The room had become her refuge, walls of books offering comfort in their silent accumulation of knowledge. She pulled down volumes at random: philosophy, geology, art criticism, running her fingers over spines Silas had touched, pages he'd read during the years he'd lived alone in this house, trying to finish what Rose had started. A shelf of poetry caught her attention. Evie had never been much for verse, found most of it deliberately obscure or emotionally manipulative. But one volume stood slightly proud of the others, as if removed and replaced many times. She pulled it down. Emily Dickinson. Selected Poems. The binding was cracked from repeated opening pages, soft with handling. A bookmark made from newspaper clipping marked a specific poem. Evie read it slowly. "Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies too bright for our infirm delight. The truth's superb surprise." Someone, Rose, probably based on the handwriting, had annotated the margins in pencil. Small notes, barely legible observations about truth and deception and the cost of honesty. The bookmark itself was a clipping from the Red Hollow Gazette, March 1976, Rose's obituary. Roseanne Ashford, 35, passed away peacefully at her residence on March 12th. Sister of local artist Silas Ashford. No services planned. Donations may be made to the Rape Crisis Center of Tucson. Peacefully. The lie was so blatant, it almost qualified as confession. Rose had taken an entire bottle of barbiturates, left a suicide note, and someone had cleaned it up as peaceful passing. Even in death, the truth was being slanted. Except Rose had fought that. Had insisted her obituary mention Rape Crisis Services, a final middle finger to the people who'd destroyed her. Evie felt a fierce pride in this woman she'd never known. This mother who'd given her life, and then given her up, and then spent 13 years watching from a distance before the pain became too much. "You deserved better than this world gave you. I'll make them remember you. I'll make them say your name and know what it cost." A sound from outside pulled her from the page. A car engine, tires on gravel. Evie killed the lights, moved to the window. A different vehicle, this time white panel van, no markings. It pulled up to the gate but didn't enter, just idled there like its predecessor. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Garrett Whitmore's voice came through, smooth, friendly, the tone of someone used to being obeyed. Mrs. Thornwood, I hope I'm not calling too late. What do you want? Just checking in, making sure you're settling into the estate comfortably. It's a large property for two people to manage alone. The threat was barely coded. He knew Beau had left, knew she and Iris were alone, knew exactly how vulnerable they were. We're managing fine. I'm glad to hear it, though I did notice you met with someone today. Florence Junction Pete's place. Interesting choice for a meeting. Evie's blood froze. He'd been following her, or had someone following her, all the way to Florence Junction and back. That's none of your business. Everything that happens in Red Hollow is my business, Mrs. Thornwood. My family has protected this town for 3 generations. We take our responsibilities seriously. His voice hardened, friendliness dropping away. Whatever you think you've found in that house, whatever stories you think you can tell, you're wrong. You're a grieving widow trying to make sense of a difficult inheritance. That's all. Walk away now, take my original offer, and everyone stays safe. Is that a threat? It's a kindness, the last one you'll receive. The line went dead. Evie stood in the dark library, phone gripped so tight her knuckles went white. The van outside remained motionless, making its presence known, making sure she understood they could reach her anytime, anywhere. Fear was a living thing in her throat, choking rational thought. But underneath it, something else burned: fury at being bullied, at watching powerful men use threats the way others used conversation, at the casual assumption that she'd fold because that's what women did when confronted with male violence. She called Cassie Monroe. The journalist answered on the first ring. You okay? Garrett Whitmore just called. He knows I met with you. He's been following me. There's a van outside my house right now. Get video. License plate, everything. Don't confront them, just document. Evie fumbled with her phone's camera-managed shaky footage of the van through the window. As if sensing they'd been recorded, the vehicle pulled away, unhurried, confident. Cassie's voice was tight with anger. This is witness intimidation. I'm filing a police report tonight, sending copies to the Arizona Republic's legal department. You're officially under journalistic protection now. Anything that happens to you becomes part of the story. Will that actually protect us? Maybe, maybe not. But it makes you radioactive from their perspective. They touch you, it proves everything you've accused them of. A pause. You want to back out, no judgment if you do. This is escalating faster than I expected. Evie thought of Rose at 22, facing down Randolph Whitmore with nothing but truth and being destroyed for it. Thought of Silas documenting crimes for years before vanishing into the desert. Thought of 89 families who'd lost everything because no one had fought hard enough to stop it. I'm not backing out. Tell me what to do. They spent 20 minutes planning. Cassie would accelerate her investigation, reach out to sources she'd cultivated in law enforcement and state government. She'd contact descendants of the defrauded families, start building a coalition of voices willing to go on record. Meanwhile, Evie would catalog everything in the basement, create digital backups, distribute copies to multiple secure locations. One more thing, Cassie's voice gentled slightly. Your granddaughter. Is there somewhere safe she could stay while this plays out? Evie looked toward the stairs where Iris slept in Rose's childhood room. She's all I have left. I won't send her away. Then keep her close. Don't let her out of your sight. Men like Whitmore don't usually target children directly, but desperate people do desperate things. After the call ended, Evie checked every lock, set her phone to record audio through the night, dragged a chair in front of Iris's door. Sleep was impossible, adrenaline and fear keeping her wired and trembling. Somewhere around 3 a.m. exhaustion finally pulled her under into dreams of Rose, standing in empty rooms, pointing at walls where truth was written in languages Evie couldn't read, mouthing words that made no sound but carried weight enough to shake foundations. She woke to Iris shaking her shoulder, the girl's voice urgent. "Grandma, the power's out, and I think someone cut the phone line." Evie's heart seized. She grabbed her cell phone, no signal. Checked the breaker box in the basement, all switches in the correct position, but no power flowing. ran to the windows, scanned the grounds in early morning light. The main power line had been cut, severed cleanly where it connected to the pole at the property's edge. And the landline. Evie followed the wire with her eyes dangled loose, sliced through at chest height just outside the kitchen window. Professional work, deliberate, done sometime in the hours before dawn while she'd slept. Iris pressed against her side, trying not to show fear. What do we do? Evie's mind raced. No power meant no refrigeration, no heat, no lights after sunset. No phone meant no way to call for help beyond her cell, and cell service in Red Hollow was spotty at best. They could leave drive to town, but that meant abandoning the house and everything in it. Meant letting Whitmore win through intimidation. We fight back. Evie pulled out her cell, checked one bar of signal. Enough. She called Beau. He answered, groggy, alarmed. What's wrong? Someone cut our power and phone lines last night. Professional job. We need help. 20 minutes. He hung up without goodbye. Evie used the remaining battery life to call Cassie, left a voicemail with details. Then she and Iris went through the house room by room, documenting everything with her phone's camera. Unforced locks, undamaged windows, no sign of entry except the severed lines. Beau arrived in 15 minutes instead of 20, truck bed loaded with tools and what looked like a generator. His face was stone jaw, set in fury Evie hadn't seen before. This is escalation. They're trying to make the place unlivable, force you out through attrition. He started unloading equipment. But they picked the wrong person to intimidate. I've been wiring houses since before Garrett Whitmore was born. By noon, Beau had the generator running, providing enough power for essentials. He'd spliced a temporary fix for the phone line, jerry-rigged from spare wire and determination. The repairs wouldn't pass code inspection, but they'd work until proper professionals could be brought in, professionals who weren't on the Whitmore payroll. Iris helped, handing tools, holding flashlights, learning through observation the way children do. Evie watched them work, feeling the weight of what she'd dragged this girl into. Iris should be in school making friends, worried about homework and sleepovers. Instead, she was learning how to survive harassment from powerful men who wanted her grandmother silenced. But the girl didn't complain, didn't ask to leave. Just focused on the work with Quinn's intensity, her father's refusal to quit showing through in every careful movement. Beau finished securing the generator, wiped his hands on a rag. This is temporary. They'll find other ways to make life difficult, building inspections that fail for phantom violations, tax assessments that skyrocket, permits denied for routine maintenance. I've seen it before, how the Whitmores operate. They use bureaucracy like a weapon. So what do we do? Same thing Rose did. Document everything. Create paper trails. Make sure when the story breaks there's evidence of retaliation. It won't stop them, but it'll make them more careful. He looked at Evie with something like pride. You're doing good work here. Scared as hell, but doing it anyway. That's what courage actually is, not the absence of fear, just the refusal to let it win. The words settled into Evie's chest, took root. She wasn't fearless, wasn't even particularly brave by any conventional measure, but she was still here, still fighting, still choosing truth over safety. Maybe that was enough.